Good morning, and welcome to the Unitarian Universalists of the Chester River. I'm Kim Agee, for those of you that don't know me, and I want to share a quick piece of grace that I experienced on my way to church this morning. I left my home in Centerville, and it was quite foggy. Anybody from Centerville come from Centerville? Yeah, so it was hanging just about eye level. So it wasn't like super dangerous to drive, but it was so beautiful. Like looking out on the farms and the neighborhoods as you're driving along, you could just see the shadow of the trees and the buildings and the homes. And then as I approached Church Hill, I came up a hill and out into the sunshine, and all the fog was gone. It was lovely second half of the ride as well. So I'm hoping your journey to here this morning was as grace-filled as that was for me. So it was lovely. And we come together here to explore more, to explore our unique spiritual journeys and learn from each other. I hope this morning that you will find words of wisdom and supportive friends here in our sanctuary. Welcome. Welcome, Michael Casey. Thank you for your music this morning. And welcome, Reverend Catherine Adams. So glad to have you. I do have two announcements this morning. One is that after the service and after coffee, we have seven announcements on Zoom. Oh, and welcome everyone on Zoom. Thank you. Thank you. All right, so our first announcement this morning is that we have a congregational meeting directly after coffee, and we're hoping for that to start no later than 11:30. And it will be about the parking lot safety. And we need to take a vote today, so we need a quorum, so we are asking our members to please be here. The second announcement I have this morning is that Reverend Catherine is going to be starting a book discussion of the book, The Turnaway Study. And this study will be to inform our decisions coming up in the elections on reproductive justice. There's a reproductive justice amendment on the ballot, and hopefully this book discussion will help us really be informed about that, our choices there. All right, those are our announcements. And now for the chalice lighting, if you will join me in the words as they are in your order of service. Now, Reverend Catherine, no, now we have a hymn. We'll join everyone in singing our first hymn, 1017, and it's in your teal hymnal this morning. Almost.
The intro to this is not easy. It goes. Use your microphone. The intro to this is kind of wonky. Then you come in on. How many? It keeps going. But
I like that. We need to sing it again.
It keeps going, but I'm not sure where.
So there are 4 verses. There are 2 more verses
Yeah.
underneath. But for today, I think that's our first good shot. Right? So that is actually one of my favorite songs in our hymnal. It's probably part of the bias because 1, it's an action and a doing thing. 2, it's also doing for us internally as well as externally. And 3, I spent some time in a gospel choir. So there's a whole lot of that has that part that makes it hard is kind of one of the things that I love about it. So it's a thing, and we'll learn and we'll practice and do more together. So a couple of opening words. So as we have finished together and opening our hearts, minds, and spirits, let us arrive and be together. Let's take a deep breath, beloved. This week, many of our Jewish siblings are in a special period of the year. Rosh Hashanah has passed, and many are preparing for Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, which will happen at the end of the week. And commonly, this is a time of reflection, prayer, and preparation. National Coming Out Day will occur on October 11th before we gather again. And the date is chosen to commemorate the Stonewall riots, where gay people acted counter to dominant culture and chose not to be afraid and comply with being arrested just for being who they are. It isn't a mistake that this is also the first Sunday of LGBTQ History Month. There is so much in the world clamoring for our attention. So as we started this section with a breath, let's take another one. All that awaits you will still be there after this hour. For now, let's turn our mind, heart, and spirit towards that inner place of our authentic self and listen to that voice. When we bring those authentic voices into community and conversation, we become beloved community.
And now is the time for our acknowledgements of the heart. As we move into our time of sharing our joys and concerns, I would like us to consider a quote from Kathleen McTeague, Reverend Kathleen McTeague, I believe. And it goes like this. Fear's pronoun is singular. I've got to watch out for me and mine. Love's pronoun is plural. We're in this together, and together we can grow things that will blossom even in a time of drought. As we share today, let us remember that we are in this together through love. And we can manage our burdens and celebrate our joys as a community. And I want to light our first candle today for those who are suffering in the aftermath of Hurricane Helene, and maybe once again in the path of a new hurricane that is developing in the Gulf. And then I will invite anyone who feels moved to silence for all those spoken joys and concerns and those that are on your heart quietly. Blessed be.
Beloveds, let us receive these sharings with joys and sorrows, each a thread connecting us in community. Let us still our minds and bodies and open our hearts to the connection to our siblings in Appalachia and those who are suffering around the world, fleeing war and violence. I now invite you to settle into your seats with your spine generally upright. Unfocus your gaze or let your eyes drift closed if that feels good to you, while I share an excerpt adapted from Listening with the Heart by Reverend Gary Kowalski. Maybe listening with the heart means listening to our dreams, paying more attention to what we really want from life, and less attention to all the nagging, scolding voices from our past. Or maybe it's about listening to each other, not thinking ahead to how we can answer or rebut or parry or advise or admonish, but actually being present with each other. Perhaps if we just sit quietly, we'll overhear a peace whispering through the centuries that's missing from the clamor of the moment. Maybe prayer means listening to the silence between the words, noticing the negativity of space, the vast, undifferentiated, nameless wonder that underlies it all. Maybe prayer doesn't mean talking to God at all, but listening with the heart.
Now, I have a reading for us this morning. Reverend Catherine shared this with me this week, and the more I've read it, the more it has spoken to my heart. So, here it is. Last night, I dreamed 10,000 grandmothers from the 1,200 corners of the earth walked out into the gap, one breath deep between the bullet and the flesh, between the bomb and the family. They told me, we cannot wait for governments. There are no peacekeepers boarding planes. There are no leaders who dare to say, every life is precious, so it will have to be us. They said, we will cup our hands around each heart. We will sing the earth's song, the song of water, a song so beautiful that vengeance will turn to weeping. The mourners will embrace, and grief replace every impulse toward harm. 10,000 is not enough, they said. So we sent this dream, like a flock of doves into the sleep of the world. Wake up, put on your shoes. You who are reading this, I am bringing bandages and a bag of scented guavas from my trees. I think I remember the tune. Meet me at the corner and let's go. So now, meet me at the corner and let's take an offering for the good works of this church. Thank you all for your generosity of spirit and action and financial support. And now, Reverend Catherine will share with us her sermon this morning, which is entitled, Welcoming the Still Small Voice of the Divine.
Beloveds, it is good to be together. Welcoming the still small voice of the divine is, for me, a practice. The practice of listening to the heart and to that still small voice inside, soul, God, inner wisdom, big mind, divine nature, and more. I notice when something has multiple words for it, it usually means it's something that's really hard to describe, but is speaking to an experience. It's something that merges and resonates with multiple traditions, and that, for me, that makes it a key node in Unitarian Universalism, because it's a wisdom that emerges pluralistically into our tradition. And for me, that listening is a practice. It's a practice of quiet, a practice of a stillness of mind. Sometimes the body is still, and sometimes the body is in a moving meditation. A practice of compassion for myself and the world, a practice of forgiveness, a practice of recognizing that I am part of creation. I am somebody. And we are all flow and energy. And holding these two contradictory truths at the same time is part of the practice. The deeper I go into these practices, the more I feel and live into the connections between and among us. Today, I invite you to act counterculturally and take some time to explore the spiritual practice that works for you, that is life-affirming, that helps you slow down, quiet, listen, and hear that still, small voice inside, and then act on it. Beloveds, this is how we become beloved community. For me, I have always chosen to live more, I've not always, that is a misspeak. I have chosen to live more counterculturally, to slow down and to build my list of all that I am grateful for, and deliberately note the simple things: breath, sunrises and sunsets, the beautiful description Kim shared with us this morning, the way the trees' leaves glow in that green that I've never been able to get that anywhere else. There's a particular glow and green that happens in that life-giving moment. The rich earth, growing things, stars. And yes, I'm grateful for the big things too. My spouse, children, work I love, because gratitude is a practice. And when I do this well, I experience and I'm grateful for what is, as it is, not in relation to a story I'm telling myself about what I'm experiencing or how it could or should be. Throughout our lives, we've learned many beautiful things and created many beautiful stories. We have also learned things that need to be recognized, challenged, and unlearned. And as we bring our authentic self into conversations, that can happen. Last week, Reverend Chute highlighted that for the truth and reconciliation process to happen, both oppressors and oppressed had to experience each other and learn they could be together and choose to be different in those relationships, to become and behave differently. This comes with powerful unlearning. There have definitely been moments when that still small voice inside has said something that I did not want to hear. Has anyone else ever felt that? I see a few hands. For me, sometimes it's asking a question I really don't want to ask. Usually means I have an idea what the answer is and I'm probably not going to like it. Sometimes it was moving into a conflict that I didn't want to do. Or maybe a call to let go of something that I had committed to, right? And when I've listened to that call of connection in spirit to do something that I may not really have wanted to do, healthy growth has generally followed. It hasn't always been easy, and actually it often wasn't. But I think that's part of true growth and transformation. Assumptions of fundamental worldview perspectives can be challenged and changed in those moments of leaning into the call of connection, of conversations with our authentic self, and that still small voice inside. And these changes are powerful. It's been foundational for me in my own anti-racist, anti-oppressive work, and growing in my ability to hold multicultural context, resisting fear. Kim offered a quote from Kathleen McTeague when she wrote about how we find things life-affirming and connection at the power of love and spiritual practice as an antidote for fear in a 2017 sermon. She noted making time for community and leaning into the connective power of love can place us in the rhythms of life and the world. This practice is really powerful for fighting fear and grounding in love. Fear's pronouns are singular. I've got to watch out for me and mine. Love's pronouns are plural. We're in this together, and together we can grow things that will blossom even in a time of drought. Now I invite us to hold that intention with a Sufi poet Rumi's call to receive all our experiences and emotions with the openness of a guest house. This being human is a guest house. Every morning, a new arrival, a joy, a depression, a meanness, some momentary awareness that comes from an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all, even if they're a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture. Still, treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whoever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. Now I wonder, beloveds, if I'm the only one who felt some resistance to entertaining sorrow, depression, and meanness. That doesn't exactly really resonate as what I want to do. And I noticed a few hands, so thank you. Yet the power in the poem is its very realness. As we heard, as we shared our joys and sorrows, every day these come into our life. These feelings are all part of this one precious life, and living in this moment, living life as it is a spiritual practice. Sorrow cleaning us out, helping us release our attachments to how things should be, because it isn't. It is what it is, as my army friends would say. Being grateful for whatever comes is an invitation to live life as it is, and not live the stories we tell ourselves about what's happening. And holding these two ideas, resisting fear and grounding in love, and welcoming every new arrival to the human guest house together, isn't easy. And beloveds, that's the point. Our ability to hold two conflicting ideas as true at the same time grows with spiritual practice, and it helps us become beloved community. These practices help us grow both in that moment and in the ability to experience the complexity of life. For fear, I receive this guest as a powerful indicator of something is important. The things I currently fear all feel really important. The climate crisis. The congregation I just finished serving as I left was the site of one of the largest fires in our nation's history that's spreading through a large area. We're facing phenomenal hurricanes. Once upon a time, a once in 100-year storm is now a routine occurrence. This feels important, right? And my fear tells me that. It's something that's important. The threats to our democracy, the rise of autocracy. I happen to like voting, and I would like to continue to do so, right? Dehumanization and the attempts to dehumanize our lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, intersex, and asexual siblings who have always been among us, or our Black and brown and indigenous and persons of color siblings, and the continued attacks to erode reproductive justice, which is so much more than access to a particular medical procedure. I invite you to take a moment and check in with what your fear is telling you is important today. Now, having received our fear, what do we do when our fear tells us something is important? And that's where I return to Reverend Kathleen McTeague's quote, do we act or react individually? Do we make ourselves smaller and look out for me and mine? Or do we lean into love, into our interdependence, and act for justice and demand equity and embrace transformation? Love's pronoun is plural. We're in this together. And together we can grow things that will blossom even in time of drought. Do we become beloved community and build mutual aid structures and lean into our Unitarian Universalist values? Let's take a breath. And I'm wondering, what would leaning into love look like for that fear that came to mind? So I'm going to pivot to demanding equity and embracing transformation from the message Rev Shuk gave on truth and reconciliation. Demanding equity from a position of privilege often means using our unasked for privilege to center the needs and voices of the marginalized. It's vital work, and it's ours to do anywhere we have privilege. And demanding equity from a position of oppression is resistance, survival, joy, and refusing to be dehumanized, using our voices and holding our sense of self. And these come together in true transformation, those moments that call and welcome the still small voice of the divine for the work that we have to do, the moments that connect us to life and weave deep community. Spirit of connection, I want to highlight the spiritual practices that many of our Jewish beloveds engage in during this period on the High Holy Days, between Rosh Hashanah, October 2nd, and Yom Kippur, which will be sunset on Friday. Teshuvah, an inward reflection. I think the mic just went out. Teshuvah. Do we hear me now? Yes. Inward reflection on our actions and working toward repair. Tefillah, the communion of the divine within ourselves, that connection to the divine being. Recognizing the divinity in ourselves is also sometimes called prayer in this communion. And tzedakah, giving, the charity as part of repair and mending. This powerful season of reflection, quiet, and taking time out of time in community are powerful spiritual practices to engage our deepest selves and humanity. And through this work, we become connected to and ready for the dream of peace we heard in the reading Kim offered. They said, we will cup our hands around each heart, and we will sing the earth's song of water, a song so beautiful that vengeance will turn to weeping, and mourners will embrace, and grief replace every impulse toward harm. 10,000 is not enough, they said, so we sent this dream like a flock of doves into the sleep of the world. Wake up and put on your shoes. Beloveds, let us dream and wake up and put on our shoes. Other seasons of reflection for that invite this countercultural pause in the Christian tradition include Lent and the Advent seasons, while mystical traditions, which cross many religions, it's more of the progressive to conservative, there's a mystical flavor of most religions, or an expression, that's better, expression. Call this exploration of our deepest selves the connection to all life throughout our lives, and it manifests in people who ground themselves in contemplation. Reverend Otis Moss III is a pastor who's the direct successor of Howard Thurman, offered that preacher Gardner Taylor, lawyer and activist Vernon Jordan, Martin Luther King, Dr. Howard Thurman, Frederick Douglass, Sojourner Truth, Fannie Lou Hamer, all had deep practices of listening to the quietness, and they could hear the Spirit moving in places that other people could not. They were contemplatives, and they changed the world. I honestly would add embracing our value of pluralism. Jesus, Buddha, and most of the Hebrew prophets were contemplatives who could hear the Spirit moving in places other people could not, and they changed the world. There are many types of or ways to approach spiritual practices that support contemplation. And part of what I love for the modern world is it honestly doesn't matter what they are. It matters that we do them and they speak to you. Whether it's Latino Divina, a formalized way of praying with sacred text, or poetry, as was offered at First Friday, and some of my other favorites are hospitality, running, and martial arts. These may not sound like deep spiritual practices, but when done with intention and attention, they can be. Everyday life can be a spiritual practice, as it was for the people that Reverend Otis Moss named. They heard the still small voice inside, living in this world, engaged with this world, transformationally. And as I'm getting to know this community, I'm appreciating the deep connection to the arts, poetry, painting, music, and more. And these are beautiful ways to spend our lives. Spiritual practices are life-affirming and involve community and recognize growth, change, and connection to the rhythms of the world in love. And I find I keep coming back to what I think of as Unitarian Universalist theology. I believe Unitarian Universalist theology is the points that resonate across the world's religions and are informed by our scientific understanding. The practice we've been talking about today, listening to and acting on the still small voice inside, our inner wisdom, is one of those points of theology. Whether we are releasing our attachments and engaged in the big mind as invited by Buddhism, or loving our neighbor as ourselves because we recognize that our neighbor is ourselves. We are children of the divine as inherited by the Christian mystics, or practicing Tikkun Olam with our Jewish siblings to heal the world. Through interpersonal neurobiology, our relationships with each other, those relationships we practice here, are forming our identities and the wholeness of humanity through our justice work. No human is now or ever has been illegal. It is a Unitarian Universalist practice to lean into and listen to the still small voice inside and that inner wisdom. And in that spirit, beloveds, in the spirit of the relationships that form us, that we form in this community, please join me in singing and embodying in whatever way movement feels good to you, hymn 1021 from our Teal hymnal, Lean on Me. Sorry, Dave, I know you don't like when we take that from there, but since I'm on mic too, I like not taking that from the podium because this is our conversation time as we enter discussion.
I just want to say thank you, both Kim and Catherine. So many beautiful words were spoken. I really loved the service today.
Thank you.
Me too.
Hi, how are you? This is my first time here. I was actually living in Chestertown for a little while now in Centerville. So I do go to the Unitarian Church down in Easton occasionally. I was for the original church up there in Baltimore, Pratt and Fayette or something like that. And across from the Enoch Pratt Library, which is incredible if you ever want to have an interesting trip. And we had the big orange angel. And my father was buried there, my mother, for funeral services anyway, my two brothers, my grandfather, it goes on. And I have survived with my two sisters. I'm the baby. And I've survived every year or minute that I get older. I celebrate because I have escaped the Huntington's disease that my family has pretty much died from. So that's it.
Welcome, and thank you for such a powerful sharing.
Thanks for coming.
Vita, did I see you indicating?
Wow, I don't know. I think most of you know my wonderful husband, Bob. And last night we got into this discussion and I said, you know, one thing I would really like you to do is to go to church with me. And I'm so sorry he didn't come. He comes from a Mormon and Catholic background, and he doesn't care much about godly religion. I understand that. I think he would have enjoyed being here today. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for inviting our friends and family. And it's an invitation, right? We don't drag people to come to church, but it's how we inviting people is how we share what's important to us. One of the things that has been requested is references for messages. And for this one, I'm also going to include the links to the poems because there were a bunch of poems interspersed. So for anyone who prefers to receive information reading or wants to go back, that'll be available in Reflections.
Listening for the still small voice is very resonant of the Quaker tradition. And it feels very much like home.
I like you're talking about love overcoming fear, because this is a fearful time right now, and so many people around us disagree with each other and all, but if we're positive and loving, that will help us overcome the fear and spread more confidence and love in the world. Are just doing that as best we can.
Thank you, Joy. And I think it's important to receive and acknowledge that fear too, right? So we can avoid getting into that confrontational love versus fear, because we receive the fear and respond in love. And that way, there's no confrontation in that, right?
I read a quote this week about fear that said, if fear was water, it would be a mile wide and only a few inches deep. And I loved that so much.
Yeah, and just the idea of leaning in, when you see fear, like leaning in, is so many times we withdraw and, cower and when you, just like the bully in the schoolyard, if you just lean in with love, you just see, it just dissipates and you feel the strength and it's, and you feel your power, and love wins every time. So thanks for that too.
Thank you, Annie. So no, I did not turn it off. As we prepare to go forth into our larger community, may we bring our calm and open hearts, make peace and grow in wholeness, give of our light and live in integrity and reciprocity, practice possibility, being fully present to each moment of this one wild, wonderful life. May it be so, beloveds. And Kim will lead us in extinguishing our chalice.
And the words are in your order of service. We extinguish the flame